Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
The price of living in America's finest city keeps going up and up. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Of course, it's expensive to live in San Diego. There's no surprise there. But a new report has a big surprise when it comes to renting a place here. KPBS reporter John Carroll explains.
America's finest city features some of America's highest prices for homes, but a new report from online real estate company Zillow reveals San Diego is now among the most expensive places to rent. The headline from the new report, average rents here have now surpassed San Francisco. Zillow senior economist Orphe Duvungi says it all boils down to supply and demand.
Higher population growth creates new demand for housing, and a tight labor market will also tend to result in higher rents.
But higher than San Francisco? Rents there were nearly 30% higher than San Diego before the pandemic. And Duvungi says the pandemic definitely played a role in the rent reversal.
You saw a lot of people leaving San Francisco who had the ability to work remotely during the pandemic. So you have this pandemic-ish shock, this effect of people leaving San Francisco to move to more affordable areas.
San Diego is now the third most expensive rental market in the country, though not by much. The average monthly rent here is now $3,175, just $7 more a month than the city by the bay.
Rent growth in San Diego actually peaked at 19% in June of 2022. It's now down to 5.3%. when compared to a peak of only 10% in San Francisco.
So where is rent more expensive than here? San Jose comes in second, and perhaps no surprise, it costs more to rent in New York City than anywhere else in these United States. As for California, Duvungi says rent and home prices will only fall so much unless we build more housing.
It's clear people still love California and want to live here. And so new construction has to be able to pick up the slack.
Looking ahead, there is some good news when it comes to rents. Zillow says they'll continue to inch downward as we get into the second half of the year. But when it's as expensive as it is to live here, that's cold comfort. John Carroll, KPBS News.
A follower of Charles Manson has been released from prison after serving more than 50 years for 2 murders. Leslie Van Houten was released from the California Institution for Women in Corona today on parole supervision. It comes after Governor Gavin Newsom announced that he would not fight a state appeals court ruling that Van Houten should be granted parole. She received a life sentence for participating in the killings of Leno LaBianca and his wife Rosemary back in 1969. Community members are demanding the release of body camera footage after an arrest left a man with extensive injuries. KPBS reporter Katie Hyson was there as they gathered outside San Diego Police Headquarters today, and a warning, viewers may find parts of this story disturbing.
We complain about him and nobody do nothing.
Musla Abdul Hafiz is a cop watcher with the Southeast Accountability Unit, a group that records the police. He was wearing his neon cop watcher vest early Sunday morning in the parking lot of Chase Bank in downtown San Diego when he heard gunshots. He says he was heading to retrieve his phone from his car when the police stopped him.
The police came back with guns out and told me to get on the ground. I got on the ground, and they immediately jumped on top of me.
San Diego police told KPBS they detained him as a, quote, possible gunman. Bystander footage shows 4 cops surrounding Abdul Hafiz, who lies on the ground asking why he's being stopped.
What about the paperwork?
Abdul Hafiz says they would not answer, but used increasing force.
And they began striking me, digging their nails inside my skin, putting their body weight on my back, my neck. They handcuffed me real tight. I still got the scars right here. And it's how tight. It's still scarred up. It was bleeding.
When Abdul Hafiz is no longer in view in the video, he begins screaming. He says the officers inflicted the worst injuries after he was already handcuffed.
You know, they're trying to pull my arms out of socket. Then they get me in the back of the patrol car. There's two of them in front of me. I don't see the one to open the back door behind me, and he pulls my shoulders again. He slides me almost out the other side of the car, trying to like break my shoulder. I already had my hands behind my back.
Medical records from after the arrest diagnose him with a fractured shoulder, head injury, and, quote, assault. Police gave Abdul Hafiz a ticket for resisting arrest. Community organizer Tasha Williamson says that charge is regularly used to justify wrongful arrests without probable cause. She is calling for an investigation into the incident and charges for excessive use of force and failure to intervene.
They can end this by charging officers just as they charge community members.
San Diego police data show officers are much more likely to use force on Black San Diegans than white. Katie Hyson, KPBS News.
Pacific Surfliner train service through Orange County is set to resume on Monday. Today, the Orange County Transit Authority announced emergency work has been completed on a temporary barrier wall to protect the track. Passenger rail service was initially stopped back in April when the slope behind Casa Romantica began to slide. It reopened in late May, only to close again in early June after more sliding occurred. For more information about train service, you can visit pacificsurfliner.com/alerts. A day after word of the sale of the San Diego Union Tribune to a hedge fund group, some former employees are talking about what it means for the newspaper, staff, and the community. KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado has the story.
A San Diego institution has been sold again.
It's been a terrible day, to be honest. A lot of people are just stunned.
Former San Diego Union Tribune reporter Jerry McCormick says news of the sale hit UT journalists hard. They found out via email.
Imagine going to work every day, putting your heart and soul into a project, and then all of a sudden just having that ripped away from you. It's a very scary feeling.
McCormick, who's also a founding member of the San Diego Association of Black Journalists, says he knows what that feels like firsthand. He went through the same thing at the UT in 2009.
Away from your family, the sacrifices you've made, and then someone somewhere decided that your services are no longer needed.
McCormick says Dr. Pat Soon Xiong, who also bought the LA Times in 2018, sold the paper to Alden Global Capital, the hedge fund group buying papers across the country.
This company is known for gutting newspapers. And so the people of San Diego should be very concerned about what's happening to the Union Tribune right now.
It's something we've heard might happen for a really long time, and then to see it happen is just very disappointing.
Wendy Fry says she's heartbroken for her former colleagues.
It's pretty hard news to take.
Fry says less reporters means less accountability for public officials and fewer voices that will be heard, but she and those who work there fear most for the community.
Concern for the community beyond anything else. You know, these journalists, people go into this career because they care about their community and they want to share what's going on in it. They want to report it. And so, you know, really the loser here is going to be the San Diego community.
Fry got emotional when she thought about what the paper and the people who work there mean to her.
I'm so appreciative of the people who, you know, taught me how to do journalism there at the San Diego Union Tribune. And, you know, I hope everything turns out for the best.
McCormick advises reporters to reach out to professional associations that have resources to help. He adds they should also take the time to reinvent themselves, something they and every journalist will need to keep up with the fast-changing world of journalism. Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
Tuition could become more expensive for California State University students after raising tuition only once in the last decade. CSU trustees met to discuss a possible hike today. CSU hopes to raise tuition by 6% through at least the spring of 2029, and that would mean an incoming full-time freshman would start off paying about $6,000 next fall. Tuition would jump to more than $7,600 by their senior year. The CSU says the hike would help pay for existing programs and retain teachers. Between Amazon Prime Days and back-to-school sales, online shopping is ramping up, but there could be a slowdown on the horizon as UPS faces a potential strike as early as August 1st. Karen Kafa explains how this could impact shipping and store shelves.
Search, click, buy, deliver. The two-day Amazon Prime Day event is off and running and prompting others like Walmart, Target, Best Buy, and Macy's to launch their own big July sales. It also highlights the supply chain that gets a package from warehouse to doorstep.
I think we take it for granted exactly how much we're purchasing, shipping. I mean, I think for a lot of Americans, we're probably getting a package maybe every other day.
While Amazon has its own delivery network, the company relies on UPS for some shipping, like many e-commerce outlets big and small. UPS carried an average of 20.8 million U.S. packages a day through last year, and more than 340,000 UPS workers represented by the Teamsters Union have authorized a strike over pay and working conditions starting August 1st if an agreement is not reached. The Biden administration is monitoring negotiations closely.
There's a reason why the parties negotiate directly. They stay at the table. I'm hopeful that that is what they will continue to do.
Virginia Tech economics professor Jadrian Wooten says a prolonged strike would have a wider ripple than many consumers might think as other shippers shoulder the extra load.
Even if you're not a UPS customer, if you are just purely FedEx, purely post office, you likely still will see an impact in your deliveries, even though you're not relying on UPS.
And it would happen at a crucial time for retailers during back-to-school shopping and as they stock shelves for the holidays. In Washington, I'm Karen Kafa.
Now that Carlsbad has approved flying the pride flag at City Hall, there's a growing discussion about other banners. City Council is set to take up a proposal by Councilmember Melanie Burkholder to discuss a flag policy. In May, Burkholder opposed a commemorative flag policy that would have allowed the pride flag. She says a list of flags suggested by constituents will be discussed at today's meeting. Some of the flags include the Confederate, Christian, National Rifle Association, Straight Pride flag, and others. LGBTQ pride events are taking place across the country amid growing threats of violence and an increasingly charged political environment. One way that's impacting pride organizations' bottom lines, skyrocketing insurance costs. KPBS reporter Scott Rod has the story.
San Diego Pride Week kicked off with SheFest on Saturday. It's a celebration of LGBTQ women and people who are non-binary and gender non-conforming. Live bands strutted the stage. Food trucks served up vegan and Indian fusion dishes, and hundreds of people checked out booths set up by vendors and community groups.
The vibe of SheFest is very much connecting with people.
Kathy Molig is Executive Director of Trans Family Support Services.
There's an entertainment factor, there's a community building factor, and there's an educational factor.
Hundreds of thousands of people are expected to attend the week-long Pride celebration in San Diego. But behind the scenes, the good vibes are tempered by a growing concern. Fernando Lopez is Executive Director of San Diego Pride.
What we're seeing right here, not just in San Diego, but all over the country, is a rise in anti-LGBT sentiment.
Here are just a few examples. Hate crimes based on sexual orientation in California increased nearly 30% last year, according to the State Department of Justice. Incidents against trans and gender nonconforming people jumped by more than 50%. Far-right groups have organized in-person confrontations at drag events across the country, and just last month, police arrested a man for an alleged bomb threat against Nashville's Pride event. All of this has gotten the attention of insurance providers.
I'm hearing from prides from LA, San Francisco, New York, and a ton of these smaller prides all over the country that the rise in insurance fees is untenable.
Insurance is required for pretty much any large event. It helps cover liabilities, like if someone sues after tripping over a curb, or if there's a mass shooting. San Diego Pride typically purchases an extra layer of insurance to cover any major incidents. Last year, the coverage cost them about $10,000. But this year, according to Lopez, it would have cost
$300,000. You can't budget for that. How could I budget for that year over year?
Pride events are being scrutinized in really unprecedented ways.
Bruce Smiley Califf is vice president and senior underwriter at Califf Insurance. The company specializes in coverage for large outdoor events, including dozens of Pride festivals nationwide. He says insurance costs are going up for all concerts and festivals for several reasons. Attendees are more likely to file lawsuits over minor incidents. Insurance markets are also overburdened in general due to a rise in costly claims tied to things like hurricanes and wildfires. And there's the growing threat of mass casualty events, like a shooting. That's a particular concern when it comes to Pride festivals.
Carriers are terrified by very, very large events, and especially ones that could be deemed a little bit more risky when it comes to acts of violence or perceived violence or threats.
These ballooning insurance costs are creating tough business decisions for LGBTQ organizations. San Diego Pride went with a more basic insurance plan this year because spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on extra insurance would have meant pulling funding from other essential programs. But that means they may be on the hook financially if a major incident happens. Sacramento's Pride Festival had to raise its ticket prices for the first time in 3 decades, in part because its event insurance more than doubled in recent years.
We got to a place where we couldn't just supplement all the additional costs with more sponsorship or more beverage sales. We had to raise the ticket prices.
David Heitzteman is CEO of the Sacramento LGBT Community Center, which organizes Sacramento Pride. He says safety and security is their top concern, but he fears increased entry fees could make the Pride Festival less accessible at a time when the LGBTQ community needs it most. Scott Rodd, KPBS News.
And a quick note, KPBS is one of the many sponsors of this year's San Diego Pride Festival, but we cover the event with editorial independence. After being postponed 3 years because of the pandemic, the San Diego Veterans Day Parade is coming back. San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria and other community leaders made the announcement today aboard the USS Midway. It will be held on November 12th, and local leaders and veterans say that they cannot wait.
It is a part of who we are to acknowledge and to celebrate veterans and their families for their service and for their sacrifice.
The parade is still in the planning stages. If you're interested in donating or helping out, you can visit sdvetparade.org for more information. Geologists are surveying the ground in a Los Angeles County neighborhood after a landslide on Saturday destroyed 12 homes. 16 residents were given about 20 minutes to pack up and leave. As Jasmine Veal explains, officials suspect excessive rain to be the cause, but don't know for sure.
Dramatic drone video Monday shows these townhomes on Pear Tree Lane in Rolling Hills Estates ripped away from their driveways, collapsed roofs, belongings just left behind, shattered windows, and a buckled chimney.
Houses just crumbling, disintegrating into each other.
Neighbors watched in disbelief as these buildings on the hillside continue to collapse. It was Saturday afternoon when LA County fire crews first located the cracks in several of these homes. 16 people were evacuated right away after firefighters determined 12 of these townhomes were uninhabitable. They were given just 20 minutes to pack up and leave.
How can you think that fast? You know you need to get your papers and medication, but what about all your memories?
We have some belongings.
Sapeti Razapour lives right across the street from the homes that collapsed. She recorded this cell phone video from her front door.
I just saw a neighbor. They came back from vacation. They saw their house is all collapsed.
She voluntarily left with her 2 kids Sunday, worried that the land will give way right under her house they bought just 2 weeks ago.
You packed up the family and slept somewhere else last night.
Yes, we did. We didn't feel safe because nobody knows how bad it's going to be.
Officials still don't know what caused this landslide or how much farther the land will crack.
They seem to think that this fissure has a terminus at the end there and that it's not
going to move beyond there.
Officials say the heavy rains could be a factor, but some gave other theories.
Some of our neighbors are saying they have seen water pipes being broken and a big, huge gush of water being, in the streets. So
prior to this?
Yes, prior to this.
Whatever the cause, it left this destruction and lives upended in less than 24 hours.
And that was Jasmine Viel reporting. Those 12 homes have been red tagged by the fire department. Neighbors worry that their homes may be next. Local officials have cut off water and gas to the area as a precaution. It's official. Summer has arrived in San Diego. The National Weather Service is warning about hot conditions in our mountains and deserts, and they say that those areas will see over 100-degree temperatures starting today through Sunday evening. Residents are encouraged to stay inside or in shaded areas and drink plenty of water. You can also beat the heat by visiting a county cool zone site. We have a map of all cool zones on our website. You can just go to kpbs.org and search cool zones.
Lots of talk about the heat coming up over the course of the next several days, well into the upcoming weekend and even spilling over to next week, especially away from the coast. Though there will be some warmth found on the coast here too. That shallow marine layer will keep a lid on the extreme heat. We'll stay dry, and we'll talk about the desert heat, how it intensifies as we go through time. I mean, excessive heat warnings are all the way out through the weekend at this point. Could see an extension of those down the road for places such as Pine Valley, Julian, Borrego Springs, even say down below 4,500 feet to 5,000, 5,500 feet into the mountains. Those temperatures are going to be running well above the historical averages. I mean, even here at night, Borrego Springs are only dropping down to the 80s, the low 80s. Mount Laguna 64. 64 also toward Chula Vista Oceanside, down to 61. There can be some patchy clouds at the coast. Otherwise, it's still a warm day around again. Chula Vista Oceanside, historical averages mid to upper 70s. We'll be in the lower 80s, but look at some of the interior valleys. We climb up into the upper 80s and 90s. And then toward Borrego Springs, we're all the way up to 106. Not a whole lot in the way of cloud coverage. There will be some very again, a thin cloudiness along the coastline as we work our way throughout the morning time frame. But that gives way to some sunshine. We're talking the low 80s next couple of days out toward the coast and hanging out around 80 degrees as we work our way right into the weekend. Meanwhile, some of the interior valleys here up in the 90s on a daily basis with lots of sunshine. Overnight lows will be trickling down into the 60s. Over the mountainous terrain, 70s here across the board. But of course, as you work your way out of the mountains down below 5,000 feet, it's a different story. And the deserts will continue to roast. In fact, look at the numbers. If anything, they're climbing up to the 100 teens Saturday into Sunday. So make sure you're finding ways to stay cool in the shade. Make sure you're staying well hydrated with lots of water, the air conditioning if at all possible, checking on the pets, the elderly, and the kids. And H2O, of course, very important. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Povick.
For people with sensitive skin or conditions like eczema or psoriasis, heat and humidity can worsen the symptoms. Health experts say some clothes and fabrics irritate skin further. Mandy Gaither has an allergist's advice on what to wear this summer.
If the summer sun is causing your skin to flare up, your wardrobe might need a change-up.
The choices in fabrics and styles really do have an impact, especially if we are someone who already has sensitive skin or deals with chronic rashes.
Dr. Kara Wada with Ohio State's Wexner Medical Center says in the heat and humidity of summer, you want to wear clothing that's smooth in texture and loose fitting.
Choosing something that is cotton or linen that's going to be breathable and also lighter in color is going to help reflect some of that heat so that our skin is able to breathe and stay cooler as well.
She says skin can actually become irritated by sweat, causing it to be inflamed.
Inflammation in our skin is what makes it leakier, it makes it itchier, and that is a large part of the root cause of our sensitive skin and eczema that we may deal with in summer.
Wada says to avoid synthetic fabrics like polyester, nylon, and spandex, which may trap in heat and sweat.
Flowier fabrics are going to be more comfortable. They're going to allow for more airflow and help our skin dry off in those areas that are getting a little bit moist.
And make sure you lock in moisture with a fragrance-free lotion. Wada says even sweaty skin can get dry in the summer. For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
Tijuana's Little League All-Star team is headed to the World Series. KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis caught up with the team after they secured a place in the international tournament.
Jorge Rubio captured the moment his son's All-Star baseball team secured a ticket to the Little League World Series. With 2 outs left in the final inning and a runner on first base, the batter pings a hard ground ball directly at first base. The crowd goes wild as soon as he tags the runner for the final out. Tijuana will represent Mexico in this year's tournament. Rubio says the entire city has been incredibly supportive.
Oh, it's been crazy. It's been crazy. You know.
All of the local news channels want to interview the players. The governor of Baja California gave them a shout out. And the local pro team, the Tijuana Toros, had them throw out the first pitch.
Pages that I don't even know that existed are covering the team.
His son, Andy Rubio, says the team is happy about the victory and ready for the big tournament.
Muy felices todos, ¿no? Por el triunfo del equipo, ya estamos allá en Williamsport.
In mid-August, the team will head to Williamsport, Pennsylvania for the Little League World Series. This is the first time in 10 years that Tijuana has represented Mexico in the World Series. Back in 2013, the team lost to Japan in the semifinals. Their first game in Williamsport is August 18th. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On NPR's Morning Edition, a chief NASA scientist talks about the extent to which some recent unusual weather patterns may persist as global temperatures continue to rise. And San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria is joining KPBS Midday Edition. We're asking him about everything from the city's latest efforts on homelessness to this weekend's Pride festivities. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.